Hello and welcome back. In earlier lecture, we understood auto discovery feature. Now, we are going to understand a very important uh, policy called as client ID enforcement policy. Very important. You'll understand, you'll get a lot of information. Okay. Please watch this video until end. Based on this concept, there will be next lectures. Okay. So don't make sure that you see this video until end. Okay. So what is the problem? Let me tell you. Suppose if this is my Mule runtime, whether it is on Cloud Hub or on premise, wherever, and assume that this is my implementation running. Normally, if any other application wants to use my API, I want to make sure that this other app requests for a permission from the API owner. See, I am the API owner for this particular API. So let me just go ahead and show you in Exchange. If you go to Exchange, who published this restaurant's SAPI? Sivaprasad Valluru. I am the owner of this API. Okay. So this API is running. I am the owner of this API. Actually, if anybody, whether within your organization or outside of the organization, if anybody wants to access my API, they should actually request permission from the API owner, me. Then if I approve it, if request access is done, then the exchange is going to generate a unique client ID and secret for the application. So actually, APIs, whenever somebody is invoking the API, who will be invoking the API? Some other apps. Let it be a web application or a mobile application. Some app will be invoking this API, right? So I want this app to be registered as a client to my API. So whoever wants to use my API, they should be able to request access to my API. Then they will be allocated with a unique client ID and secret. Let me show you how a request access can be done within our organization. Even within our organization, if some other team from other business unit wants to use my API, I am the API owner, they should request access. So how, see, I'm in Exchange. This is the restaurant's SAPI. Here, there is a request access button. Now, if I click on request access button, it's asking select which API instance. Do you see this is the API ID 1923431, the one which we enabled, the API. This is the API ID. And then for which application is asking? See, assume that somebody within your organization wants to use the API, they are requesting access. Hey, don't worry. Right now, I'm logged in as same user within the organization. Assume that I'm logged in as some other user within the organization. So I'll be able to see the exchange and I'll be able to request access, right? Right now, just assume that I am logged in as some other user within the same organization. Okay, I'm using same thing, but assume that I'm actually logged in as a separate user. Now I'm going to request an access. I have to select which API instance I want to access. Then it is asking me, which application do you want to use? I have to create application. I have to give an application name, my mobile, just for example, mobile app. Assume that some mobile app is going to make a request. And rest all are optional. What is your application URL, OAuth, and all? These are all optional. I will not give. Now, click on create. That's all. This SLA tier we'll discuss in next lecture. I am just making a request access. Okay. Your request has been received and approved. Okay. So by default, as this user is belonging to same organization, by default approval is not required. Request is auto approved. Okay. But now I want you to understand that a client ID and secret is generated. So this application, this client application will be uniquely identified by using a client ID and client secret. So whenever a request is coming to my API implementation, I want a policy which will check in the incoming request, is there a valid client ID and secret or not? So if any request is coming to my API implementation without a valid client ID and secret, I want to give an error message. If request is coming and the client ID and secret are coming as part of headers, I'm expecting client ID and secret as part of headers. If this client ID and secret are coming as part of headers, then the access should be allowed. That is my requirement. So for that, there is a policy called as client ID enforcement policy. So first of all, let me open Notepad. I will copy this client ID and client secret. Then I'll close it. So fine. Now I'll go back to my API manager. For my API, I want to add a policy. There are a lot of policies. Earlier, we have enabled basic authentication simple, right? I will remove this policy. I could have more than one policy applied as well, but I'm removing this policy. Removed. Then I'm going to add another policy under security. Let us see if there is client ID enforcement policy. Where is that? No. Okay, compliance. Under compliance, there is client ID enforcement policy. The policy says all calls to the API must include client ID and client secret. So I'll apply this policy. Next. It is saying the client ID will be expected from headers. This policy will use these expressions to extract the client ID and client secret. Okay. So that means what? For this policy, whenever this policy is enforced, client ID and client secret has to be in headers. Suppose if you are expecting this in query parameters, suppose if you want the policy to expect client ID and secret in query parameters or maybe as part of body, you can feel free to configure these expressions. But I will go with defaults. Next, apply. So I applied this client ID enforcement policy. Let us wait until the policy gets applied. I should see the log here on the console. Let us wait. Yes, I can see that client ID enforcement policy is applied, and I can see in policies folder, there is client ID enforcement folder in which the policy documents will be present. Now, let me try to make a request. I don't need authentication. I removed this authentication policy. And if I try to make a request, see, authentication denied 401. Now what I have to do is in my headers, I need to pass client underscore ID. The value, I'll copy it from my notepad. Client underscore secret. Again, I'll copy the secret. Now, let me make a request. Yes, I got it. So, we have applied client ID enforcement policy. Now, what my API will be accepting requests from a valid client applications. The client applications which has requested client ID, which has the valid client which has requested access from Exchange. Actually, let me tell you, in API in Exchange, who all will be able to see the API in Exchange? Only only the members belonging to the organization will be able to see this API in Exchange, and they'll be able to request access, right? What if some third party wants to access? What if some third party wants to access your API? Will they be able to see your API in Exchange? No, right? For them, we have a public portal, right? I have published this same API already in public portal. I'll go to this public portal URL. Hey, this is the public portal URL. What I will do is, I will log in incognito window, and I will try to see this API. See, this is the API. I didn't log in. So anybody, the public also will be able to see this API in the public portal. Now, this is the API. Now, you are not logged in. Nobody has actually, nobody is logged in, right? So they cannot request API access. Now, if somebody wants to access my API, they also should have an Anypoint platform account. So what I will do is I'll click on login. I'll try to create one more account just for demonstration. ZeroToSiva 1000. I'll sign up. Sorry, I'll sign up. I'll say ZeroToSiva. Some email 0@gmail.com and something. Something. I'll give company name as some company. Okay, they'll not validate it. Number of employees. Oh, it's asking too much of details. Username. I'll write 0 1000. Password. I am not a robot. Create an account. So I created an account, and I'm actually trying to access the API from ZeroToSiva, right? So Anypoint platform is asking me to me the permissions. Yes, I will grant permissions. Okay. Now, as a third-party user, I'm able to see this API. I'll click on summary. Okay. But am I seeing request access button? No, right? I'm not seeing this request access button anywhere. If I see API instances, actually, if I see this API instances, there is something called as a mocking service instance. But my actual published instance, the instance ID is what you can see here. The instance ID for this API, if you can see the instances, this instance is not visible on the public portal. Only mocking service instance is visible. There are two instances. One is mocking service instance and another is this one. This is not yet made public. This instance is within the organization. So if I want this instance also to be accessible from public, I'll have to make this as public. So now I made it as public. Let me go to portal and refresh the page. If I go to home, here there is request access button. Earlier this home page was not there. Directly summary was there. Here I was not able to see. Now if I go to home, request access button is there. Now I can request access as some third party user. This user, whatever I created right now, is not belonging to the same organization. So I'll request access for this API instance. It is again asking me for the application name. I'll give third party app. Just I'm giving some name. These all are optional. I'll just click on create. Now request access. Request has been received and approved. Good. Now, if I go to API manager, for this API, for this API, I'll go back. Here, actually, there's client applications. Do you see that these are the client applications? This my mobile app is for someone who is within the same organization, and this is from third-party app, right? They all are auto-approved. Okay, fine. Now, I can see this. Now, I'll go to API portal. In the API portal, see, this is a third-party user. Under my applications, this application is visible. And these are the client ID and secret of the third-party app. Now let me use the client ID and secret of third-party app, client ID. Okay. Secret. Now send. Yep, I got it. Okay. So now I'm able to actually access it. Now, suppose if I am the API owner and later now I decided that I don't want to give permission for this third-party app, what I can do is, I'm the owner of the API, right? I logged in as the owner of the API. I will revoke the permissions, revoke the contract, revoke. See, now this client ID and secret are not having permissions. So if I send a request, hey, I think it will take some time. It will take some time for those things. I'll give a request now. Now I got invalid client 401. Is it? So the API owner will have a full permissions, whether to revoke permissions or grant permissions, etc. Now, if I delete this app also will be deleted. If I want to restore, okay, I want to give permissions again. Okay, so I restored. Maybe I'll wait for a few more seconds and then I'll give a request. Now I got it. So the API owner will have full control of who all can access this API if client ID enforcement is done. So I hope you clearly understood about this client ID enforcement policy. Clear? So I want you to follow this video again, follow the steps, whatever I have done. Try to do it on your own. If you do it on your own, then only you will get confidence. Again and again, I'm saying, watching the video will not give you confidence. Doing it will give you confidence. So before you go to next lecture, make sure that you practice whatever I have told you. See you in next lecture.